In a world ravaged by catastrophe, the once bustling metropolis now stands as a testament to humanity's hubris. Skyscrapers, once symbols of progress, loom like broken teeth against a perpetually gray sky. Amidst this desolation, we find Maria, a young woman of 25, her eyes hardened by years of survival yet still holding a flicker of hope. Every day is a battle for her, not just against the harsh elements and dwindling resources, but against the creeping despair that threatens to consume her spirit. As she navigates through the skeletal remains of what was once a thriving city, Maria's every step is calculated, every decision a matter of life and death. The silence that envelopes her is broken only by the occasional crunch of debris under her worn boots, and the whisper of wind through abandoned structures. But what drives Maria forward? Is it merely the instinct to survive, or does she cling to a greater purpose in this broken world? As she scans the horizon, her gaze lingers on the faint outline of mountains in the distance. Could there be others out there, hidden away in some untouched pocket of civilization? Or is she truly alone in this vast expanse of ruin? The weight of solitude presses down on her, a constant companion in this new reality. Yet, even as she grapples with the daily challenges of finding food, water, and shelter, a part of Maria refuses to let go of the hope that somewhere, somehow, she might find connection again. What would you do in Maria's position? How long could you hold on to hope in a world that seems to have abandoned all semblance of the life you once knew? As we delve deeper into Maria's story, we're forced to confront our own resilience and the very essence of what makes us human. In a world stripped of its comforts and conveniences, what remains at our core? These are the questions that haunt Maria as she continues her solitary journey through the wasteland, each step a defiance against the void that threatens to swallow her whole. Will she find the strength to keep going, or will the harsh realities of this new world finally break her spirit? As night falls and Maria seeks shelter in the hollow shell of a former bookstore, we're left to ponder the fragility of our own existence and the strength it takes to face each day in a world turned upside down. The faint glow of her makeshift fire casts dancing shadows on walls once lined with stories of adventure, romance, and human triumph. Now, those tales seem like distant dreams from another life. Maria's fingers trace the spines of dusty books, a bittersweet reminder of the knowledge and imagination that once flowed freely. She selects a tome at random, its pages yellowed and brittle, and begins to read by the flickering light. For a moment, she's transported away from her grim reality, lost in words that echo a world long gone. But the respite is brief. A sudden noise outside snaps her back to alertness. Friend or foe? In this new world, the line between the two is often blurred. Maria extinguishes her fire with practiced efficiency, plunging herself into darkness. Her hand finds the reassuring grip of her makeshift weapon, a piece of rebar wrapped in leather, as she strains her ears to discern the source of the disturbance. Minutes pass like hours as Maria remains perfectly still, her breath shallow and controlled. The noise doesn't repeat, but she knows better than to let her guard down. How many nights has she spent like this, poised between fight and flight, her senses hyper-aware of every creak and whisper in the darkness? As the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the sky, Maria allows herself to relax slightly. She's survived another night, but what challenges will the new day bring? With methodical movements, she packs her meager belongings, a water bottle, some scavenged cans of food, a first aid kit cobbled together from looted pharmacies, and the book she was reading. It's a luxury she can ill afford, but one that keeps a small flame of her old self alive. Stepping out into the pale morning light, Maria surveys the desolate street before her. Which direction holds the promise of supplies, of safety, of answers? Every choice could lead to salvation or doom. But standing still is not an option. With a deep breath, she chooses a path and begins to walk, her footsteps echoing in the empty canyon of decaying buildings. As Maria ventures forth into another uncertain day, we're left to wonder, in a world where society has crumbled and the future is shrouded in darkness, what would you cling to? What memories, what hopes, what aspects of your humanity would you fight to preserve? And how far would you go to find a glimmer of light in the all-encompassing shadow of a post-apocalyptic world? 5 years ago, the world as we knew it came crashing down. It wasn't one cataclysmic event, but a perfect storm of disasters that brought humanity to its knees. Maria remembers it vividly, the memories etched into her mind like scars on the landscape around her. It began with increasingly violent weather patterns. Hurricanes ravaged coastlines, tornadoes tore through cities, and floods submerged entire regions. As nations struggled to cope with these natural calamities, tensions between countries escalated. Resources became scarce, and the threat of war loomed ever larger on the horizon. Then came the earthquakes. Unprecedented in their frequency and intensity, they shattered the foundations of civilization. Major cities crumbled, vital infrastructure collapsed, and millions were displaced overnight. In the chaos that followed, conflict erupted. What started as skirmishes over dwindling supplies quickly escalated into all-out warfare. Maria was just 20 when it all began. She watched in horror as her vibrant city descended into anarchy. The streets she once walked carefree became battlegrounds. Familiar faces turned hostile, driven by desperation and fear. In a matter of weeks, everything she held dear was stripped away. Her family, like so many others, tried to flee. But where could they go when the entire world was falling apart? Maria can still hear the screams, the sound of gunfire, the deafening roar of buildings collapsing. In the chaos of evacuation, she was separated from her parents and younger brother. 5 years later, their fate remains unknown, a wound that refuses to heal. Now, as Maria navigates this post-apocalyptic landscape, every step is a reminder of what was lost. The challenges she faces daily would have seemed insurmountable in her previous life. Finding clean water is a constant struggle. She's learned to scavenge for food in the most unlikely places, to distinguish between edible plants and toxic imposters. Each meal is a small victory against starvation. Shelter is another critical concern. The weather has become even more unpredictable in the aftermath of the global catastrophe. Acid rain falls without warning, and sudden temperature shifts can be deadly. Maria has become adept at finding secure locations to weather these storms, but it's a never-ending battle against the elements. Perhaps the most insidious threat, however, comes from other survivors. In the vacuum left by the fall of governments and social order, various factions have emerged. Some band together for mutual protection, while others have turned to violence and exploitation. Maria has had several close calls with these groups, each encounter reinforcing her wariness of human contact. Yet, despite the daily hardships and constant danger, a part of Maria refuses to give up hope. She clings to the belief that somewhere out there, civilization is rebuilding. Perhaps there are communities working together, pooling their knowledge and resources to forge a new future. It's this glimmer of possibility that drives her forward, that gives her the strength to face each grueling day. As Maria picks her way through the ruins of what was once a bustling shopping district, she pauses to look at her reflection in a shattered storefront. The young woman staring back at her is almost unrecognizable from the carefree student she once was. Her face is leaner, her eyes harder, her posture tense and ready for action. But beneath the grime and weariness, there's still a spark of determination. What would you do if everything you knew was suddenly torn away? How would you adapt to a world where the rules of society no longer apply? Maria's journey is a testament to human resilience, but it also raises questions about the nature of civilization itself. In stripping away the veneer of modern life, has this catastrophe revealed the true essence of humanity, both its capacity for cruelty and its potential for extraordinary compassion? As Maria continues her solitary trek through this broken world, we're left to ponder our own ability to survive in the face of overwhelming odds. What skills would serve us best in a world without technology, without the comforts we take for granted? And more importantly, how do we hold on to our humanity when survival becomes the only goal? Maria's days are a constant battle against the harsh realities of her new world. Each sunrise brings fresh challenges, and every sunset is a small victory. Over the years, she's honed her survival skills to a razor's edge, adapting to the unforgiving landscape with a determination that borders on obsession. Water, once taken for granted, is now precious beyond measure. Maria has learned to collect rainwater using makeshift systems of tarps and containers. She's become adept at identifying safe water sources, using improvised filters made from sand, charcoal, and fabric to purify what she finds. Every sip is savored, every drop accounted for. Food is an equally pressing concern. The grocery stores and restaurants of her old life are now nothing more than hollow shells, picked clean years ago. Maria has become an expert forager, able to distinguish edible plants from poisonous lookalikes. She's learned to set simple traps for small game and to fish in the polluted streams that wind through the city's ruins. Some days, her meals are nothing more than a handful of bitter herbs or a stringy rodent, but it's enough to keep her going. Shelter is a constant consideration. Maria moves frequently, never staying in one place for too long. She's developed an uncanny ability to spot safe havens amidst the urban decay, abandoned apartments with sturdy locks, hidden basements, or even the occasional intact treehouse in a park reclaimed by nature. Each night brings new dangers, and Maria sleeps lightly, always ready to flee at a moment's notice. But it's not just the physical challenges that Maria must overcome. The psychological toll of prolonged isolation and constant vigilance is immense. To keep her mind sharp, she's developed routines and mental exercises. She recites poetry from memory, solves complex math problems in her head, and creates elaborate stories about the lives of those who once inhabited the ruins around her. These mental gymnastics are as crucial to her survival as any physical skill. One day, while exploring an abandoned hospital in search of medical supplies, Maria's carefully honed instincts are put to the test. The building's dim corridors echo with an eerie silence as she methodically searches each room. In the pharmacy, she hits the jackpot, a cache of antibiotics and painkillers that could prove life-saving in the future. As she's stuffing her backpack with the precious medicines, a noise from the hallway freezes her in place. Voices, rough, angry, and definitely not friendly. Maria's heart races as she realizes she's not alone. A group of scavengers, likely drawn by the same potential for supplies, is making its way through the hospital. In that moment, all of Maria's training kicks in. She quickly assesses her options: fight, hide, or run. Fighting is too risky. She's outnumbered and doesn't know how well armed they might be. Hiding could work, but if found, she'd be trapped. Running, then, is her best bet. With practiced silence, Maria eases towards the back of the pharmacy, searching for another exit. She finds a small window, partially obstructed by an overturned shelf. As the voices grow closer, she works quickly to clear the obstruction, her movements deliberate and controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Just as she hears the pharmacy door begin to open, Maria slips through the window. She drops to the ground outside, allowing herself only a split second to orient before sprinting towards the cover of a nearby building. Behind her, Shouts of anger erupt as the scavengers discover her presence. The chase is on. Maria's intimate knowledge of the city's ruins becomes her greatest asset. She weaves through alleys, vaults over debris, and uses every trick she's learned to lose her pursuers. It's a harrowing game of cat and mouse, with Maria's life hanging in the balance. Finally, after what feels like hours but is likely only minutes, Maria finds herself alone again. She's managed to escape, but not unscathed. In her frantic flight, she's twisted her ankle and acquired several cuts from squeezing through tight spaces. As the adrenaline fades, the pain sets in. Limping to a secluded spot, Maria allows herself a moment to catch her breath and assess her injuries. They're not life-threatening, but they'll slow her down in the days to come. As she tends to her wounds using some of the very supplies she risked her life to obtain, Maria reflects on the close call. This incident is a stark reminder of the constant dangers that lurk in her world. But it's also a testament to her resilience and adaptability. She survived, not just through luck, but through the skills and instincts she's developed over years of facing similar challenges. As night falls, Maria finds a secure spot to rest and recover. She knows that tomorrow will bring new challenges, new risks, and new opportunities for survival. But for now, she allows herself a small smile of triumph. She's still here, still fighting, still alive in a world that seems determined to extinguish all life. What would you have done in Maria's situation? How do you think you would fare in a world where every day is a fight for survival? Maria's experiences raise profound questions about human nature and our capacity to adapt. In stripping away the comforts and structures of modern society, has this new world revealed the true essence of what it means to be human? The aftermath of Maria's narrow escape at the hospital proves to be a grueling test of her will to survive. As she limps through the desolate streets, each step sends a jolt of pain through her injured ankle. The adrenaline that fueled her flight has long since faded, leaving her exhausted and vulnerable. For the first time in years, Maria begins to question whether she has the strength to go on. Seeking refuge, she stumbles upon an abandoned apartment building. With great effort, she climbs to the third floor, choosing a unit with a view of the street below. As she barricades the door with what little furniture remains, the full weight of her situation crashes down upon her. The cuts on her arms sting, her ankle throbs, and a deep, bone-weary fatigue settles over her like a heavy blanket. As night falls, Maria's physical pain is eclipsed by a far more insidious enemy, doubt. In the quiet darkness, memories of her past life flood her mind. She sees her family's faces, hears their laughter, feels the warmth of their embraces. The stark contrast between those happy memories and her current reality is almost too much to bear. For the first time since the world fell apart, Maria allows herself to cry, her sobs echoing in the empty room. Questions plague her restless mind. What's the point of struggling to survive in this broken world? Is there any hope for a better future, or is she simply prolonging her suffering? The loneliness that she's kept at bay for so long threatens to engulf her completely. In this moment of weakness, the idea of giving up seems almost appealing, a final release from the constant struggle. As dawn breaks, Maria finds herself at a crossroads. Part of her wants to stay in this room, to let fate take its course. But something within her refuses to give in to despair. With trembling hands, she reaches for her backpack and pulls out a bottle of painkillers, part of her hard-won bounty from the hospital. As she swallows the pills, her gaze falls on something tucked in the corner of the room, a battered notebook. Curiosity piqued, Maria retrieves the notebook. Opening it, she discovers it's a diary left behind by another survivor. The pages are filled with a mix of practical survival tips and deeply personal reflections. The unknown author writes of their own struggles, their moments of despair, but also of small triumphs and unwavering hope. One passage, in particular, catches Maria's eye. Some days, the weight of this world feels unbearable. But then I remember, every sunrise I witness is a victory. Every moment I choose to keep going is an act of defiance against the chaos. We may be separated, but we're not alone. Somewhere out there, others are fighting, surviving, hoping. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find each other someday. These words strike a chord deep within Maria. She realizes that by giving up, she would be surrendering not just her own life, but the potential to connect with others who might be out there, fighting their own battles. The diary serves as a powerful reminder that even in this shattered world, humanity persists. Inspired by this unexpected connection across time and space, Maria makes a decision. She will not only continue to survive, but she'll also leave her own mark on the world. Using the few blank pages left in the diary, she begins to write. She documents her own experiences, shares survival tips, and most importantly, leaves messages of hope for any future readers who might stumble upon her words. As the pain in her ankle begins to subside, Maria formulates a new plan. She'll stay in this apartment for a few days, allowing her injuries to heal. But she'll use this time productively, creating small caches of supplies and leaving encouraging messages hidden throughout the city. Even if she never meets another soul, the idea that her efforts might help someone else gives her a renewed sense of purpose. This moment of crisis has transformed into a turning point for Maria. The crushing weight of loneliness has been replaced by a sense of connection to unseen others, past, present, and future survivors who share her struggle. She realizes that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising every time you fall. As Maria sets about organizing her supplies and planning her next moves, a small smile plays on her lips. The road ahead is still fraught with dangers and uncertainties, but she faces it with a rekindled spirit. She is no longer just surviving, she is part of something larger, a scattered, resilient community of humans refusing to let the light of hope be extinguished. What would it take for you to find hope in a seemingly hopeless situation? How do you think the power of human connection, even indirect, can impact our will to persevere? Maria's experience raises profound questions about the nature of resilience and the human spirit's capacity to find meaning in the darkest of circumstances. In a world stripped of so much, what becomes truly valuable? With renewed determination, Maria emerges from her temporary sanctuary, her injuries healed and her spirit reinvigorated. The diary she discovered has become her most prized possession, a tangible link to other survivors and a reminder of the humanity that persists even in this broken world. As she steps out into the quiet streets, Maria's eyes scan her surroundings with fresh purpose. She's no longer just surviving, she's on a mission. Maria begins by leaving small caches of supplies in strategic locations throughout the city. A first aid kit tucked behind a loose brick in an old church. A sealed container of purified water hidden in the hollow of a tree in what was once a bustling park. Each cache is accompanied by a note, words of encouragement, practical advice, or simply a reminder that the finder is not alone in this struggle. As she moves through the urban wilderness, Maria starts to see the city differently. Every building, every street corner becomes a potential lifeline for another survivor. She develops a system, marking safe routes and dangerous areas with subtle signs that only a keen observer would notice. A pattern of pebbles here, a specific arrangement of debris there. It's a silent language of survival, waiting to be deciphered by those who need it most. Maria's days take on a new rhythm. She still hunts for food and scavenges for supplies, but now she does so with an eye towards excess, always setting aside a portion for her caches. She becomes more daring in her explorations, venturing into areas of the city she previously avoided. driven by the thought that her efforts might save a life. One day, while scouting a new area, Maria stumbles upon an old community center. Most of it has been picked clean, but in a back room, she discovers a treasure trove of educational materials, books on agriculture, basic medicine, and engineering. An idea begins to form in her mind. Knowledge, she realizes, might be the most valuable resource in this new world. With painstaking care, Maria begins to create a survival guide. She combines the practical tips from the diary she found with her own hard-won experiences. Pages torn from the educational books are integrated, creating a comprehensive manual for life in the post-apocalyptic world. She makes multiple copies, hiding them in various locations across the city, each one a seed of hope and resilience. As weeks pass, Maria notices subtle changes in her environment. Some of her caches have been accessed, the supplies taken but often replaced with other items, a silent exchange between unseen survivors. She finds new markers appearing alongside her own, expanding the network of safe routes. Once, she even spots fresh writing added to one of her hidden messages, a simple thank you that brings tears to her eyes. These small signs of life and cooperation fuel Maria's efforts. She begins to leave more elaborate messages, not just survival tips but stories, poems, and encouragements. In abandoned buildings, she creates wall murals with whatever materials she can find, bold, colorful affirmations of life and hope amidst the gray desolation. One afternoon, as Maria is leaving her latest cache in the shell of an old library, she hears a sound that stops her in her tracks, a human voice, calling for help. For a moment, she hesitates, years of caution warring with her newfound sense of purpose. But the voice calls again, weaker this time, and Maria makes her decision. As she moves towards the source of the cry, Maria reflects on how far she's come. From a solitary survivor focused only on her own existence, she's transformed into someone willing to risk her safety for the chance to help another. She realizes that in trying to save others, she's saved herself from the crushing isolation that once threatened to overwhelm her. The voice leads her to a partially collapsed building. Carefully, Maria makes her way inside, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. As she rounds a corner, she sees him, a man, trapped beneath fallen debris, his eyes widening in disbelief at the sight of another human being. In this moment, as their eyes meet, Maria understands that her world has changed once again. The lonely days of solitary survival are behind her. Whatever happens next, she knows that the real journey, the journey of rebuilding not just lives but connections, community, and hope, is just beginning. What would drive you to extend help in a world where trust could mean the difference between life and death? How might the act of helping others transform your own sense of purpose and belonging? Maria's evolution raises profound questions about the nature of humanity in crisis. Is our truest strength found not in individual survival, but in our capacity to connect and cooperate, even in the most challenging circumstances? The sound of shifting rubble fills the air as Maria carefully navigates the unstable terrain of the partially collapsed building. Her heart races, a mix of adrenaline and apprehension coursing through her veins. It's been years since she's interacted with another person, and the prospect is both thrilling and terrifying. As she rounds the final corner, she sees him clearly for the first time. The man is pinned beneath a fallen beam, his face etched with pain and exhaustion. Their eyes meet, and for a moment, time seems to stand still. In that gaze, Maria sees a reflection of her own struggles, her own loneliness, her own desperate will to survive. "I'm here to help," Maria says, her voice hoarse from disuse. The man nods weakly, relief washing over his features. As Maria assesses the situation, her mind races through the possibilities. The beam is heavy, but not impossible to move with leverage. She scans the area for anything she can use as a makeshift lever. As she works to free him, they exchange names. The man is Pedro, and he's been trapped for nearly 2 days. Maria listens as he recounts how he came to be in this predicament, a scavenging mission gone wrong, a moment of carelessness leading to catastrophe. His story is punctuated by grunts of pain as they work together to shift the debris. Finally, with a tremendous effort, they manage to lift the beam enough for Pedro to crawl free. As Maria helps him to his feet, supporting his weight, an unexpected realization hits her. The way Pedro had arranged some nearby debris while trapped, it matches one of the signs she's been using to mark safe areas. The messages, she breathes, hardly daring to believe it. The supply caches. Have you? Pedro's eyes widen with recognition. That was you, he asks incredulously. I've been following those signs for months. They saved my life more than once. In that moment, the true impact of Maria's efforts becomes clear. All those days of leaving supplies, of marking safe routes, of spreading messages of hope, they weren't in vain. They had made a real difference, even if she hadn't known it until now. As they make their way out of the building, supporting each other, Maria and Pedro begin to share their stories. They talk of their lives before the catastrophe, of the challenges they've faced since, and of the moments that kept them going when all seemed lost. Pedro reveals that he too has been leaving messages and supplies, inspired by the anonymous helper he now knows was Maria. Their conversation flows easily, years of pent-up thoughts and emotions finding release. They laugh at shared experiences of ridiculous survival situations, and their eyes glisten with unshed tears as they speak of lost loved ones. It's cathartic, healing in a way that neither of them realized they needed. As night falls, they find shelter in a secure location Maria had prepared earlier. Over a small fire, sharing a meal of scavenged food, they begin to plan. Both have survived on their own for so long, but now the possibility of companionship, of shared resources and knowledge, opens up new horizons. They dream aloud of expanding their network of safe houses and supply caches. Of finding and helping other survivors. Of perhaps, one day, building a true community. It's a fragile hope, but it's more than either of them has had in years. As they talk late into the night, Maria reflects on the incredible turn of events. Just days ago, she had been at her lowest point, questioning the very purpose of her continued existence. Now, she feels a renewed sense of purpose, a connection that fills the void she's carried for so long. Pedro's presence brings challenges as well as comfort. Trust, long dormant, must be relearned. The habits of solitary survival clash at times with the need for cooperation. But with each shared meal, each watch stood together, each problem solved as a team, they grow stronger. As dawn breaks on their first full day together, Maria and Pedro stand side by side, looking out over the ruined city. The landscape hasn't changed, but their perception of it has. Where once they saw only desolation and danger, now they see possibility. Every broken building could be a shelter. Every overgrown park could be a source of food. Every silent street could lead to another survivor in need of hope. Ready? Maria asks, shouldering her pack. Pedro nods, a small smile playing on his lips. Ready. Together, they step forward into the unknown, no longer alone in facing the challenges of this new world. Their encounter has changed everything, proving that even in the darkest of times, human connection can light the way forward. What would it mean to find unexpected companionship after years of isolation? How might the dynamics of survival change when you're no longer alone? Maria and Pedro's meeting raises intriguing questions about trust, cooperation, and the fundamental human need for connection. In a world where individualism has been the key to survival, How does one relearn the art of collaboration and mutual support? The days that follow Maria and Pedro's fateful meeting mark the beginning of a profound transformation, not just for them, but for the desolate city they inhabit. Their partnership quickly evolves into a symbiotic relationship, each complementing the other's strengths and shoring up weaknesses. Maria's knack for navigation and scavenging pairs perfectly with Pedro's mechanical skills and medical knowledge, gleaned from pre-apocalypse training. Together, they embark on an ambitious mission to expand their network of safe houses and supply caches. What started as Maria's solitary effort now grows exponentially. They develop a more sophisticated system of signs and symbols, creating a hidden language that guides other survivors to safety and resources. Their markers begin to appear across larger swathes of the city, a silent beacon of hope in the urban wilderness. As weeks turn into months, Maria and Pedro's efforts bear unexpected fruit. One day, while reinforcing a shelter, they hear a tentative call. Approaching cautiously, they discover a small family, a mother, father, and young child, who have been following their signs for weeks. The reunion is emotional, filled with tears of joy and relief. It's a poignant reminder of the impact their work has had and the possibility of rebuilding not just survival, but community. This encounter is just the beginning. Gradually, other survivors emerge from the shadows, drawn by the promise of safety and companionship. Each new arrival brings unique skills and knowledge, enriching their growing community. An former engineer helps design more efficient water collection systems. A botanist introduces techniques for urban farming, transforming a derelict rooftop into a thriving garden. A retired teacher begins holding classes for the handful of children, ensuring that knowledge is preserved and passed on. As their numbers grow, so do the challenges. Disputes arise over resource allocation and decision-making. The threat of outside raiders increases as their success becomes more apparent. Maria and Pedro find themselves in leadership roles they never anticipated, mediating conflicts and organizing defenses. It's a steep learning curve, but they approach it with the same determination that's kept them alive all these years. Despite the hardships, there's an undeniable sense of hope permeating their fledgling community. For the first time in years, laughter echoes through the streets. Music, long absent, can be heard floating from windows. In the evenings, people gather to share stories, to teach and learn, to simply enjoy the comfort of human company. It's a far cry from the world they lost, but it's a start, a rebirth amid the ruins. 1 year after their initial meeting, Maria and Pedro stand atop their main building, surveying the changes below. Solar panels glint on rooftops, jury-rigged wind turbines spin lazily in the breeze. Gardens burst with life in once barren lots. The streets, while still bearing the scars of catastrophe, show signs of care and purpose. Did you ever imagine this? Pedro asks, his voice soft with wonder. Maria shakes her head, a smile playing on her lips. Never. But now that it's here, I can't imagine anything else. As they watch the sun set over their reborn community, Maria reflects on the journey that brought them here. From the depths of despair and isolation, she found not just survival, but purpose. In reaching out to help others, she discovered the true strength of human resilience and the power of connection. The future remains uncertain. Resources are still scarce, and dangers lurk on the horizon. But as Maria looks at the faces of her community members, faces etched with determination, hope, and solidarity, she knows they'll face whatever comes together. In this moment, standing beside Pedro and overlooking the fruits of their shared vision, Maria realizes a profound truth. The apocalypse didn't just end one world, it created the opportunity to build another. A world where compassion trumps selfishness, where community outweighs individual gain, where hope flourishes in the most unlikely places. As night falls and lights begin to twinkle in windows below, Maria and Pedro descend to join their community. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to rebuild and redefine what it means to not just survive, but truly live in this changed world. What does it take to rebuild a society from the ground up? How do the values and priorities shift when starting anew? Maria and Pedro's journey from solitary survivors to community leaders raises fascinating questions about human nature, social structures, and the essence of civilization itself. In the face of unimaginable loss, how do we find the strength not just to endure, but to create something meaningful and lasting?